The stars had always been there, waiting. Humanity just needed time to reach them. In the year 2247, Captain Jacob Miller stood on the bridge of his ship, the Horizon, and watched something that changed everything. There, floating in the darkness of space, was a massive structure that nobody on Earth had built. Jacob was a careful man. He had spent 15 years in space, mapping systems and searching for signs of life. Now, he had found it. The structure was huge, made of metals that shimmered in colors he had never seen before. Lights moved across its surface in patterns that looked almost alive. "Run every scan we have," Jacob said to his crew. His voice was steady, but his hands shook slightly. This was the moment humanity had dreamed about for centuries. The scans came back with impossible results. The structure was a space station, and it was old. Very old. It had been orbiting this star for at least 3,000 years, and it was occupied. Lieutenant Amy Foster was the ship's diplomat. She had trained for years to represent humanity, if they ever met aliens. Now that moment had arrived, and she felt completely unprepared. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission. It's in multiple languages. They're trying to communicate with us." The translation software worked quickly. Within minutes, they had established basic communication. The beings who ran the station called themselves the Zenthari. They were traders, merchants who moved goods between stars, and they were not impressed with humanity. The first meeting happened on the station. Amy walked through corridors that felt wrong, designed for bodies that were not human. The Zenthari who greeted her was tall, covered in scales that changed color as it moved. Its eyes were cold, calculating. "Another young species," the Zenthari said. Its name was Velxus. "How interesting. Welcome to the galaxy. Humans, you are very late to join us." Amy tried to maintain her dignity. "We're happy to meet you." Velxus made a sound that might have been laughter. "I am sure you do. Let me save you some time. There are 47 major species in this galaxy. Most of them have been traveling the stars for thousands of years. You are newcomers. Very primitive newcomers." The words stung, but Amy kept her face neutral. "We may be new, but we're eager to learn." "Of course you are," Velxus replied. "Everyone is. At first. Come. I will tell you about the Galactic Council." Over the next few hours, Amy learned just how small humanity really was. The galaxy was divided into territories controlled by ancient empires. The Zenthari controlled most of the trade routes. The Korvaxi Union had the largest military. The Eldari were so old and advanced that other species treated them almost like gods, and between them were dozens of smaller species, all competing for resources and influence. Earth was classified as a Class 7 civilization. That was the lowest level that the Council recognized. It meant humans were barely qualified to exist in galactic society. The Council offered Earth observer status, which meant they could watch meetings but had no vote and no power. Commander Paul Jensen became Earth's first ambassador to the Council. He traveled to a world called Axis Prime, where the Council held its meetings. The building was enormous, designed to hold representatives from dozens of different species. Paul sat in the section marked for observers and watched as beings argued about trade routes and mining rights. What surprised Paul most was how they talked about war. To these ancient species, war was like a game with strict rules. They fought with agreed-upon weapons. They avoided civilian targets. They followed protocols that had been established thousands of years ago. "We don't understand why you look so confused," said Ambassador Thelm, a Korvaxi who had befriended Paul. The Korvaxi looked like giant insects, with hard shells and multiple eyes. "War is a tool of diplomacy. We use it when necessary, but we do so with honor." Paul smiled politely. "Where I come from, war is what happens when everything else fails. And when we fight to win." Thelen's antennae twitched in what might have been amusement. How primitive. But perhaps That is to be expected from such a young species. Back on Earth, the government was making plans. President Karen Lewis called together the best military minds on the planet. General Richard Hayes was among them, a man who had fought in the wars that unified Earth decades earlier. "The situation is clear," Karen said. "We're surrounded by species that see us as children. They don't take us seriously. That could be dangerous if things go wrong." Richard nodded. "We need to build ships. Real warships. Not exploration vessels. We need to be ready to defend ourselves. But we don't want to appear aggressive," Karen replied. "We're trying to join the galactic community, not threaten it. Then we'll be quiet about it," Richard said. "We'll build what we need and hope we never have to use it." The shipyards around Earth and Mars began working in secret. Engineers studied the alien technology they had access to, but they also kept what made human designs unique. The first warships were smaller than alien vessels but packed with weapons and armor. They had backup systems for their backup systems. Every station could be operated manually if the computers failed. Captain Lisa Chen was given command of the Columbia, one of the first destroyers. She was a veteran pilot who had spent years flying in Earth's orbital defense force. Now she had a real warship, and she drilled her crew constantly. "The aliens rely on automation," Lisa told her officers. "Their ships run with minimal crews because computers do most of the work. We're different. Every person on this ship needs to know how to do at least 3 different jobs. If something breaks, we fix it. If systems fail, we adapt." Her crew thought she was being too harsh at first. Then they saw alien ships and understood. The alien vessels were impressive, huge, and powerful. But they were also predictable. They followed patterns that had been established centuries ago. Meanwhile, trouble was brewing in the galaxy. The Krenth Dominion was a military empire on the edge of known space. They were aggressive, constantly pushing into new territories. Their latest target was a peaceful species called the Marathi. The Marathi were gentle beings who had no military. They lived on a handful of colony worlds and spent their time studying science and art. When the Krenth fleet arrived at their borders, they asked the council for help. Paul Jensen watched as the council debated what to do. The discussions went on for weeks. Some species wanted to send help. Others argued that it would be too expensive. The Xanthari calculated the economic impact. The Eldari suggested diplomatic solutions. But nobody actually did anything. Then the Krenth attacked. The Marathi colonies were destroyed in a matter of days. The people were enslaved. Their worlds were stripped of resources. The council issued a formal complaint and imposed sanctions that the Krenth ignored completely. News of the massacre reached Earth, and the public reaction was immediate. People filled the streets in every major city, demanding action. The message was clear. Somebody needed to help the Marathi. President Karen Lewis knew that getting involved could be dangerous. Earth was weak compared to the Krenth. The council might see human interference as inappropriate, but she also knew that doing nothing was not an option. She addressed the world from the United Nations building. "We didn't ask to join this galaxy at this time," she said. "But we're here now, and we have to decide who we want to be. Do we watch while innocent people suffer? Or do we stand up and do what's right? Even if it's dangerous." The decision was made. Earth would send military forces to free. The human fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Pelion system. Admiral Peter Grant stood on the bridge of the Columbia and looked at the tactical display. 40 Krenth warships were scattered across the system, occupying the Marathi colony worlds. "They've detected us," reported Lieutenant Danny Brooks from the tactical station. Grant watched the enemy ships begin to move. They were forming up in a wall formation, a classic tactic that was probably thousands of years old. The Krenth wanted to meet the humans head-on and crush them with superior firepower. "All ships, this is Grant. Execute scatter pattern Alpha. Let's show them something they haven't seen before." The 12 human ships suddenly broke formation and scattered in different directions. Each ship moved on its own course at maximum speed. The Krenth formation hesitated, confused by the unexpected maneuver. Commander Vexthar led the Krenth fleet from his flagship, the Warbringer. He was a veteran of dozens of battles, and he had never seen anything like this. Enemy fleets didn't scatter. They formed lines and exchanged fire according to established rules of engagement. "What are they doing?" Vexthar demanded. "This makes no sense. They're making themselves vulnerable." His tactical officer studied the display. "Sir, their ships are moving too fast for our targeting systems to get a solid lock. And they're not following any formation we recognize." Vexthar growled in frustration. "Then we'll hunt them down one at a time. All ships, break formation and pursue." It was exactly what Grant had wanted. The moment the Krenth fleet broke apart, the human ships changed tactics. They started working in pairs, isolating individual Krenth vessels and hitting them from multiple angles. Captain Lisa Chen commanded the Columbia with precision. Her ship darted in close to a Krenth destroyer, fired a full spread of magnetic accelerator rounds, then veered away before the enemy could respond. The solid projectiles punched through the Krenth shields and tore into the hull. "Their shields are designed for energy weapons," Lisa's weapons officer reported. "Our kinetic rounds are going right through." "Good," Lisa replied. "Target their engines. If we can't kill them, we'll cripple them." Across the battlefield, similar scenes played out. The human ships were smaller and weaker than the Krenth vessels, but they moved faster and fought smarter. They didn't stand still and trade blows. They hit and ran, striking from unexpected angles and then disappearing before the enemy could retaliate. Captain Steve Morrison commanded the destroyer Defiance. He found himself facing a Krenth cruiser that was 3 times his size. The cruiser's plasma cannons could have destroyed the Defiance in one shot, but Morrison didn't give them the chance. "Helm, maximum evasive," Morrison ordered. "Weapons, fire everything we have at their weapon systems." The Defiance twisted and spun through space like a fighter craft rather than a warship. The Krenth cruiser fired again and again, but Morrison's ship was never where they expected it to be. Meanwhile, the Defiance's guns systematically destroyed the cruiser's weapons one by one. After 10 minutes of this dance, the Krenth cruiser was defenseless, its guns disabled and its engines damaged. Morrison didn't destroy it. Instead, he moved on to the next target, leaving the crippled ship behind. The battle raged for hours. The Krenth had more ships and more firepower, but they couldn't adapt to the human tactics. They kept trying to force the humans into traditional combat, and the humans kept refusing. Captain George Palmer commanded the frigate Sentinel. He was outnumbered and outgunned, facing 2 Krenth destroyers at once. Instead of running, he did something unexpected. He launched every drone his ship carried, creating a cloud of false targets that confused the Krenth sensors. While the enemy ships wasted ammunition shooting at drones, Palmer slipped behind them and fired at their engine sections. Both Krenth ships lost power and began drifting, but the humans weren't invincible. The frigate Guardian took a direct hit from a Krenth plasma cannon. Her shields collapsed, and her hull was breached. Captain Andrew Ross's voice came over the fleet channel, distorted by static. "This is Guardian. We've lost main power and life support. Hull breaches on multiple decks. We're dead in space." Admiral Grant didn't hesitate. "All ships, converge on Guardian's position. We're not leaving anyone behind." "Endin, I'm Heaven." 3 human ships broke off from their attacks and raced toward the damaged Guardian. They formed a protective screen around her, fighting off Krenth ships, while damage control teams worked frantically to restore power. It took 30 minutes of desperate combat, but they got the Guardian's engines running again and evacuated the damaged sections. The Krenth were learning, though. Commander Vexithar began ordering his ships to work in groups, trying to trap the fast-moving human vessels. Several times, human ships found themselves caught between multiple Krenth vessels with nowhere to run. That's when the humans showed another trick. Captain Lisa Chen found herself surrounded by 3 Krenth ships. Instead of trying to fight her way out, She ordered her crew to vent all their waste and excess mass into space. The cloud of debris didn't hurt the Krenth ships, but it did something more important. It blocked their sensors. By the time the cloud cleared, the Columbia was 1,000 kilometers away, and the Krenth had lost their target. As the battle entered its 8th hour, the momentum had clearly shifted. The Krenth had started with 40 ships. Now, they had less than 20 still combat-ready. The humans had lost 3 frigates, but the rest of their fleet was still fighting. Commander Vexthar looked at his tactical display with growing horror. His fleet was being torn apart by an enemy that shouldn't have been able to hurt them. The humans were using weapons and tactics that weren't in any military manual he had studied. "How are they doing this?" he demanded. "They're primitives. They've been in space for less than a century." His tactical officer had no answer. The truth was simple, but hard for the Krenth to accept. The humans fought differently because they thought differently. They didn't follow rules or honor or tradition. They just fought to win. Admiral Grant watched the tactical display and made a decision. "All ships, form up on the Columbia. We're going after their flagship." The human fleet gathered together for the first time since the battle began. 12 ships, now reduced to 9, formed a spearhead aimed directly at the Warbringer. The Krenth flagship was massive, powerful enough to destroy the entire human fleet if it landed clean shots. But it didn't get clean shots. The human ships came in fast and scattered again at the last moment, each one attacking from a different angle. The Warbringer's guns tried to track them all, and couldn't. Magnetic rounds and missiles hammered into the flagship from every direction. Commander Vexthar felt his ship shaking from multiple impacts. Systems were failing. His crew was taking casualties. And still, the humans kept coming, relentless and impossible to predict. "Sir, we've lost main weapons," his tactical officer reported. "Shields are down to 30%. Hull breaches on 7 decks." Vexithar looked at the tactical display. His fleet was shattered. The humans had done the impossible. They had won. "Send a transmission to the human fleet," Vexthar said quietly. The words were bitter, but he forced them out. "We surrender." The silence that followed was profound. Surrender was almost unknown in Krenth culture, but continued fighting meant total destruction. And even Vexthar's pride had limits. Admiral Grant received the surrender and immediately ordered a ceasefire. "All Krenth vessels, power down your weapons and release the Marathi prisoners. Do this, and you can leave with your lives." Within hours, the Marathi were free. They emerged from Krenth prison ships, hardly able to believe what had happened. A species they barely knew had come across the galaxy to save them. Ambassador Linth of the Marathi met with Admiral Grant aboard the Columbia. The small, gentle being looked up at the human with wonder. "Why?" Linth asked simply. "Why did you risk everything to save us?" Grant thought about the question. "Because it was the right thing to do. Because nobody else would. Because we're human, and that's what we do." News of the battle spread across the galaxy faster than light. Every species heard the same impossible story. Earth, the newcomer species, had defeated the Krenth military in open combat. The months following the Battle of Pelian's Edge were strange for humanity. Earth went from being ignored to being the center of attention. Every species in the galaxy wanted to understand how such a young civilization had defeated an established military power. Ambassador Paul Jensen found himself besieged by requests for meetings. The Korvaxi wanted to learn human tactics. The Zenthari wanted trade agreements. Even the mysterious Eldari expressed interest in studying human psychology. The Galactic Council held a formal inquiry into the battle. Paul sat in the witness chamber and answered questions for 3 days straight. The council members couldn't understand how the humans had won. "Your ships were smaller," said a Korvaxi general named Thros. "Your weapons were less powerful. By every calculation, you should have lost. So, how did you win?" Paul considered his answer carefully. "We didn't fight the way you expected. We adapted to the situation, instead of following a predetermined plan. And we were willing to take risks that your military doctrine probably forbids. But that's chaos, Thros protested. War requires order, discipline, established procedures. War requires victory, Paul replied. The conversation spread throughout the galaxy. Military theorists from dozens of species began studying human history, trying to understand how such a violent past had created such effective warriors. What they found disturbed many of them. Dr. Helen Park led a team of human scientists working with alien researchers. She presented a paper to the Galactic Scientific Council that explained Earth's unique approach to warfare. Most species in the galaxy evolved past total war thousands of years ago, Helen explained. They developed rules and limitations because they could afford to, but humans nearly destroyed ourselves multiple times. We fought world wars that killed millions. We developed weapons that could end all life on our planet. We learned to fight without limits because our survival depended on it. An Eldari scientist named Solith listened with interest. So you are saying that humanity's violence is actually a survival adaptation? Exactly, Helen replied. We're not naturally more aggressive than other species. But we're much better at organized violence. Because we've had to be. It was either get good at war or go extinct. This explanation made some species nervous. If humans were that good at fighting, what happened when they decided to expand their territory? What happened if Earth became aggressive instead of defensive? President Karen Lewis addressed these concerns in a speech to the Galactic Council. Earth has no interest in conquest. We fought at Pelion because we saw people who needed help. That's the only reason. We're not building an empire. We're just trying to do the right thing. Not everyone believed her. The Krenth certainly didn't. They had been humiliated by their defeat. And Commander Vexthar had been replaced by a new leader, named Warlord Kresh. Kresh was smarter and more cautious than his predecessor. He began studying human tactics obsessively, looking for weaknesses. Meanwhile, something else was happening. The Mirathi, grateful for their rescue, proposed a formal alliance with Earth. Other small species started approaching humanity as well. The peaceful Thanari, the industrial Brel, the intellectual Quarren, they all saw Earth as a potential protector. We're building a coalition without meaning to, General Richard Hayes told President Lewis during a secure meeting. These smaller species are looking to us for protection because the Council failed them. That makes us responsible for their safety. Karen nodded slowly. Then we need to make sure we can protect them. How's the shipbuilding program going? We're launching 5 new destroyers this month, Richard replied. And the first of the heavy cruisers should be ready in 6 months. But there's a problem. The Zenthari are making it difficult to get the materials we need. They control most of the trade routes, and they're not happy with our growing influence. The conflict with the Zenthari came to a head when a human convoy was attacked by pirates. The pirates used Zenthari weapons and operated from Zenthari space. When Earth demanded an explanation, Overseer Velxus claimed ignorance. We cannot control every trader in our territory, Velxus said smoothly. These pirates act independently. We are sorry for your losses, but we bear no responsibility. Admiral Peter Grant didn't believe that for a second. He assembled a small task force and sent them into Zenthari space with orders to investigate. What they found confirmed his suspicions. The pirate bases were being supplied directly by Zenthari merchants, with Krenth military advisors providing training. Commander Steve Morrison led the investigation. His ship, the Defiance, had been repaired after the Battle of Pelion's Edge and was stronger than ever. When he found the pirate base, he didn't hesitate. This is the UES Defiance to Pirate Station. You have 1 hour to surrender and release any prisoners. After that, we're coming in. The pirates responded with weapons fire. That was a mistake. The Defiance and her escort ships destroyed the pirate base in less than 30 minutes. They rescued 24 hostages from various species and captured evidence linking the Zenthari directly to the operation. When this evidence was presented to the Galactic Council, Overseer Velxus denied everything. But other species started asking questions. If the Zenthari were innocent, why were there weapons at every pirate base? Why were Krenth advisors training the attackers? The political pressure forced the Zenthari to back down. They agreed to crack down on illegal operations in their space, though nobody really believed they would follow through. But the incident showed something important. Earth was willing to fight for its interests, even against powerful opponents. The Coalition of Free Worlds was formally established 6 months after the Battle of Pelion's Edge. Earth, the Marathi, the Thenari, the Brel, and a dozen other species signed a mutual defense pact. They agreed to share technology, coordinate military efforts, and support each other against threats. Captain Lisa Chen was promoted to Commodore and given command of the Coalition's first combined fleet. It was a strange assignment. Her ships included human destroyers, Mirathi science vessels, Thenari support craft, and Brel industrial ships converted into carriers. "This is going to be interesting," Lisa told her second-in-command, Captain George Palmer. "We have 7 different species, all with different ideas about how ships should operate. Then we teach them the human way," George replied with a grin. "Flexibility, adaptation, and improvisation." The first Coalition fleet exercises were chaotic. Alien crews struggled with concepts that humans took for granted. The idea of having manual backups for every system seemed wasteful to species who relied on automation. The practice of cross-training crew members in multiple roles was seen as inefficient, but slowly, they learned. A Mirathi captain named Lyra proved especially adept at the human style of warfare. Her science vessel, the Enlightenment, became known for creative tactics that surprised even the human instructors. The Korvaxi watched all of this with great interest. General Thross requested permission to observe Coalition exercises. What he saw challenged everything he had been taught about military organization. "Your ships operate independently," Thross observed. "Each captain makes decisions without waiting for orders from command. How do you maintain coordination?" "Do here." The deep space sensors picked up the first signs 3 weeks before anyone understood what they meant. Dr. Patricia Hughes ran the Helios Observatory, a research station funded jointly by several Coalition species. She noticed strange gravitational patterns at the edge of mapped space. At first, Patricia thought her equipment was malfunctioning. The readings didn't match anything in the database. She ran diagnostics 3 times before accepting that the sensors were working correctly. Something massive was moving through space at the galaxy's edge, and it was getting closer. "This can't be natural," Patricia told her team. "Natural phenomena don't move in formation. This is artificial. This is ships." The data was transmitted to Earth and to the Galactic Council simultaneously. Within hours, other observation posts confirmed the findings. Something was approaching from the intergalactic void. Something big. Admiral Peter Grant called an emergency meeting of Coalition leadership. Representatives from a dozen species gathered via holographic communication. The mood was tense as Grant displayed the sensor data. "We're tracking at least 200 contacts," Grant explained. "Possibly more that our sensors can't detect yet. They're moving in formation toward the outer colonies. And they're not responding to any communication attempts." Ambassador Linth of the Mirathi spoke quietly. 200 ships? That's larger than any fleet ever assembled by the Council. "Who are they?" demanded a Brel representative. "Krenth? Some unknown empire?" Dr. Helen Park had been analyzing the sensor data non-stop. She looked exhausted as she delivered her report. "The technology doesn't match anything we've encountered. Their ships appear to be partly organic, biological components fused with mechanical systems. And their energy signatures are unlike anything in our database. The first contact happened at a mining colony called Viridian 9. 20,000 people lived there, mining rare minerals for the Coalition. The colony sent out a distress signal that was brief and terrifying. Unknown ships in orbit. They're not responding to hails. They're firing on the colony. They're taking everything. The buildings are dissolving. The equipment is being absorbed. Please, someone, help. The signal cut off abruptly. Commodore Lisa Chen was the closest coalition commander. She took the Independence and 3 escort ships to Viridian 9 at maximum speed. What she found when she arrived made her blood run cold. The colony was gone. Not destroyed, but harvested. The buildings had been stripped down to bare rock. The mining equipment had been taken. The ground itself had been excavated in places, and the people were gone without a trace. The alien ships were still there. Massive things that looked like they had been grown rather than built. Their hulls pulsed with bioluminescent patterns. They moved through space with an organic grace that was beautiful and horrible at the same time. "All hands to battle stations," Lisa ordered. Her voice was calm, but inside she felt fear like she had never experienced. "Helm, get us out of here. We need to report this." The alien ships detected the Independence and turned toward her. Their weapons created gravity distortions that warped space itself. The Independence's shields barely held against the onslaught. Only Lisa's expert piloting kept them alive long enough to escape. Back at Coalition headquarters, Lisa's report sent shockwaves through the assembled leaders. The aliens were being called the Harvesters, and the name fit. They consumed everything in their path, stripping worlds down to bedrock and absorbing all matter they encountered. The Harvesters spread rapidly through the outer colonies. They hit mining outposts, farming worlds, and trading stations. Everywhere they went, they left nothing behind. No survivors, no structures, just empty rock. For the first time in thousands of years, the Galactic Council faced a threat that didn't care about their rules or their politics. The Harvesters didn't negotiate. They didn't conquer. They simply consumed. Ambassador Paul Jensen stood before the full Council Assembly on Axis Prime. The chamber was more crowded than he had ever seen it. Every species was represented, and for once, they weren't arguing about trade routes or territorial disputes. "We're facing extinction," Paul said bluntly. "Not just humans. Not just the Coalition. Every species in this galaxy. The Harvesters are coming, and they don't distinguish between us. To them, we're all just resources to be harvested." General Thross of the Corvaxi stood up. "The human speaks truth. The Corvaxi Union will commit our full military strength to a joint defense. But we need unified command. We need coordination across all our forces." Overseer Velxis of the Zenthari looked uncomfortable. "And who would command such a force? The Council has never appointed a supreme military commander." "I nominate Admiral Peter Grant of Earth," Thross said, and the chamber erupted in shocked murmurs. The humans have proven their tactical superiority. More importantly, they have experience fighting enemies who don't follow traditional patterns. If anyone can find a way to defeat the Harvesters, it's them. The debate lasted for hours. Some species objected. Others supported the idea. But in the end, survival outweighed politics. Admiral Grant became Supreme Commander of the Allied Defense Force. The first human to hold such a position. Grant accepted the appointment with no celebration. "I'm not interested in politics or honor. I'm interested in keeping people alive. Every species, every colony, every ship. We're going to need your best crews, your best vessels, and your willingness to learn new ways of fighting. The Harvesters won't follow the old rules, so neither can we." The crash course in human military doctrine began immediately. Human instructors spread across Council space, teaching alien crews about flexible tactics, redundant systems, and rapid adaptation. It was hard going. Concepts that seemed obvious to humans were completely foreign to species that had fought the same way for millennia. But the threat was too great to ignore. Alien crews struggled through the training, learning to think like humans, learning to adapt and improvise. Slowly, the Allied Defense Force began to take shape. The first major engagement happened at Arcturus Station, a strategic outpost at a major junction of trade routes. 50 harvester ships descended on the station, and a defensive fleet of coalition and council vessels met them there. The battle was brutal. Harvester bioweapons infected ship systems, turning them against their own crews. Their gravity weapons crushed vessels that got too close. But the Allied forces had learned from human tactics. They didn't stand still. They adapted. Mixed squadrons of human, Korvaxi, Mirathi, and even Zenthari ships worked together, combining their different strengths. When conventional weapons proved insufficient, they improvised. Captain George Palmer commanded a squadron of mixed ships. He noticed that the harvester vessels were partly organic and proposed a desperate solution. What if we hit them with biological weapons? Diseases, viruses, anything that might disrupt their organic components. The Mirathi had advanced medical science. They developed a nanovirus that attacked organic tissue at the cellular level. It was deployed through modified torpedoes, and the results were effective, but horrifying. Harvester ships began to decay from within, their organic components failing. The battle was won, but at a terrible cost. 20 Allied ships were destroyed. Thousands died. But they had proven that the harvesters could be fought, could be hurt, could even be killed. Admiral Grant commanded the growing Allied Defense Force from the Unity, a massive dreadnought built specifically as a mobile command center. He worked 18-hour days, coordinating defensive efforts across dozens of systems. Commodore Lisa Chen served as his tactical advisor. Together, they developed strategies that combined alien technology with human creativity. The key was keeping the harvesters off balance, never giving them time to fully adapt to Allied tactics. But the harvesters were learning too. They adapted to the nanovirus. They changed their formations to counter mixed squadron tactics. Every advantage the Allies gained was temporary. The war became a race to see who could adapt faster. The cost was staggering. Entire colonies were evacuated ahead of harvester advances. Refugee ships fled toward the galactic core. Military casualties mounted into the hundreds of thousands. Every species was bleeding. But something remarkable was happening in the crucible of war. Old prejudices were fading. The Korvaxi warrior, who died saving a human transport, was honored by both species. The Zenthari merchant who donated her entire fleet to the war effort became a hero. The divisions that had defined galactic politics for millennia were dissolving under the pressure of shared survival. Humanity paid its share of the price. The destroyer, Defiance, was lost holding the line at the Battle of Sigma Crossing. Captain Steve Morrison and his entire crew died buying time for civilian evacuations. Their sacrifice was memorialized across the galaxy. Through it all, Earth's reputation grew not from conquest, but from sacrifice. Humans fought harder, adapted faster, and took on the most dangerous missions. They threw themselves into impossible situations, not out of recklessness, but out of stubborn refusal to abandon anyone to the harvesters. Admiral Peter Grant stood in the command center of the Unity and studied the tactical display. 300 harvester ships were approaching Axis Prime. It was the largest fleet the aliens had assembled. And their intention was clear: destroy the heart of galactic civilization. "They're trying to cut off the head," Grant said to Commodore Lisa Chen. "Take out Axis Prime, and the Council falls apart. The Alliance fragments. We lose coordination, and they pick us off one system at a time." Lisa nodded. "So, we stop them here, no matter what it costs." So, the Allied Defense Force had assembled 400 ships to defend Axis Prime. It was the largest fleet ever brought together in galactic history. Ships from 30 different species, all operating under unified command, all trained in the tactics that humanity had pioneered. Grant opened a channel to the entire fleet. "All ships, this is Unity, actual. We've drilled for this. We know their tactics, and they think they know ours. Time to show them they're wrong. All ships, execute Operation Thunderhead." The Allied fleet didn't form traditional battle lines. Instead, They scattered into dozens of small squadrons, each one operating independently, but coordinated through the Unity's tactical network. It was the human way of warfare, taken to its logical extreme. The harvesters advanced in their typical swarm formation, designed to overwhelm through numbers and bioweapons. But the Allied fleet didn't meet them head-on. The squadrons darted in and out, striking from unexpected angles, never staying still long enough for the harvesters to target them effectively. Commodore Lisa Chen commanded the vanguard from the Independence. Her squadron included human destroyers, Korvaxi cruisers, Mirathi science vessels, and even Zenthari merchant ships that had been converted into warships. It was a mix that shouldn't have worked, but it did. All ships, tight formation until optimal range, then scatter on my mark, Lisa ordered. Remember, unpredictability is our advantage. Don't do what they expect. The Independence led her squadron in a high-speed approach toward the Harvester left flank. At the last moment, the ships scattered, each one attacking from a different vector. The Harvesters tried to compensate, but their coordination broke down under the chaotic assault. Captain George Palmer commanded a mixed squadron that included ships from 5 different species. They used a tactic he had developed during the war: the Cascade Strike. His ships attacked in sequence, each one drawing harvester fire, while the next one struck at exposed sections. Target their larger vessels first, Palmer ordered. We need to thin out their heavy hitters before they can deploy their gravity weapons. But the harvesters were adapting too. Halfway through the engagement, they began exhibiting new behaviors. Their ships started coordinating in ways they hadn't before, responding to Allied tactics faster than previous encounters. Dr. Helen Park was monitoring from the Unity's science station. Admiral, they're learning in real time. It's like they're running simulations and implementing countermeasures on the fly. I've never seen anything like it. Then we need to give them problems they can't simulate, Grant replied. He opened a channel to all commanders. All ships, authorized for freelance operations. Stop following doctrine. Make it up as you go. Keep them guessing. What followed was controlled chaos. Ships began executing maneuvers that weren't in any manual because their commanders invented them on the spot. A Korvaxi cruiser used its tractor beams to throw debris at enemy ships. A human frigate vented atmosphere to create an emergency thrust that helped it dodge a gravity weapon. The Thanari captain Lyra used her science vessel's sensor arrays to create false signatures, drawing harvester fire away from damaged Allied ships. Then she coordinated strike from other vessels to exploit the distraction. But the cost was terrible. Ships were dying on both sides. The Korvaxi dreadnought, Indomitable, took a direct hit from a harvester bioweapon. General Thross himself was aboard. His final transmission was simple and dignified. For the Alliance, for all of us, for the future. The Indomitable's crew scuttled their ship rather than let the bioweapon spread to other vessels. 3,000 Korvaxi died in an instant, but they saved countless others. The battle raged for hours. Slowly, painfully, the Allied forces began to gain the upper hand. Not through superior firepower, but through unpredictability. Every Allied ship fought differently, made different choices, used different tactics. The harvesters could adapt to patterns, but they struggled against true chaos. As the fight reached its climax, Admiral Grant made a decision that shocked everyone. I'm taking the Unity in. Full burn toward their flagship. Sir, that's suicide, Lisa protested from the Independence. The Unity is a command ship, not a combat vessel. Exactly why they won't expect it, Grant replied calmly. Every ship in this fleet is fighting for their lives. Time. The command vessel did the same. The Unity was primarily designed for coordination and control, but she was still a dreadnought with heavy armor and powerful weapons. Grant pushed her to maximum speed, driving straight toward the massive Harvester flagship that coordinated the enemy fleet. The Harvester flagship had stayed at the rear of the formation, directing the battle from a safe distance. Suddenly, it found itself under direct assault from one of the largest ships in the Allied fleet. All weapons, continuous fire, Grant ordered. Don't stop shooting until we're out of ammunition or they're dead. The Unity unleashed everything: railguns, missiles, energy weapons, experimental technology from a dozen different species. At point-blank range, the barrage tore into the Harvester flagship's biomechanical hull, and something remarkable happened. The massive Harvester ship began to convulse. Its coordination broke down. Across the entire battlefield, Harvester ships suddenly lost their unified purpose, each one reverting to independent action. The flagship was their command nexus, Dr. Helen Park shouted over the noise of explosions. Without it, they're losing central coordination. The Allied fleet seized the advantage immediately. Coordinated strikes targeted Harvester ships that were now fighting individually rather than as a unified force. One by one, the alien vessels fell or retreated into faster-than-light travel. When the last Harvester ship either fled or went silent, the battlefield fell quiet, except for the crackle of damaged systems and the hiss of venting atmosphere. The Allied fleet had won, but at a terrible cost. Of the 400 ships that had begun the battle, fewer than 250 remained combat-capable. Entire squadrons had been wiped out. Thousands were dead from every species. The debris field stretched across millions of kilometers. Admiral Grant surveyed the damage to the Unity. His ship had taken catastrophic hits. Entire sections were open to vacuum. Systems were failing across the board. But the ship had survived, and so had enough of the Allied fleet to call it a victory. All ships, begin search and rescue operations, Grant ordered. Scan the debris for any survivors, from any species, ours or theirs. Quote, ours or theirs. One of his officers looked surprised. Sir, you want us to rescue Harvesters? Grant's expression was tired but firm. If there are survivors who aren't hostile, yes. We fought this war to preserve life, not to become killers. We end this as civilized beings, not as monsters. In the aftermath, the galaxy took stock of what had changed. The Harvester threat wasn't eliminated entirely. They still existed at the edges of known space, but they had been dealt a severe blow, and they didn't return for a long time. More importantly, the species of the galaxy had proven they could work together when it mattered. The divisions that had defined galactic politics for thousands of years had dissolved under the pressure of shared survival. The Galactic Council reconvened in a temporary chamber. The first order of business was a vote that seemed inevitable. Earth was granted full council membership, not as a junior member or observer, but as a senior partner with equal status to the oldest species. Ambassador Paul Jensen stood before the council as an equal for the first time. We didn't ask for this war. We didn't ask to become a military power. But we did what was necessary to protect the innocent and preserve civilization. That's what humanity brings to this council. The willingness to stand and fight when others hesitate. The ancient Eldari representative Solith spoke. Humanity taught us something we had forgotten. We had become comfortable in our power, complacent in our superiority. We forgot that survival must be earned every day. For this lesson, painful as it was, we are grateful. Even Overseer Velxis of the Zenthari, who had opposed Earth at every turn, acknowledged the new reality. The Zenthari Collective proposes new trade agreements, treating Earth and the Coalition as equal partners. But perhaps the most significant gesture came from the Korvaxi. In recognition of Admiral Grant's leadership, they offered him permanent command of a new unified defense force. Grant declined. I'm a soldier, not a politician, he said. My job was to win the war. Building the peace is someone else's work. Besides, Earth needs me. We have a new generation to train. Commodore Lisa Chen was promoted to admiral and given command of the Coalition Defense Fleet. Captain George Palmer became her second in command. Together with officers from dozens of species, they began transforming wartime cooperation into lasting peace. On Earth, the return of the fleet was marked by both celebration and Admiral Peter Grant retired from active military service 3 years after the Battle of Axis Prime. He was 62 years old, and the war had aged him beyond those years. But when the new Fleet Academy opened on Mars, he agreed to teach there. Someone had to pass on the lessons that humanity had learned. The Academy was unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. Students came from 40 different species, all training together to become officers in the Unified Defense Force. The building itself was a marvel of combined architecture, designed to accommodate beings of vastly different sizes and environmental needs. On his first day, Grant stood before a classroom of 200 cadets. Humans sat next to Korvaxi. Mirathi students shared workspace with Zenthari. A Thanari cadet in the front row took notes with 3 different appendages simultaneously. War should always be the last resort, Grant began. But when it becomes necessary, you fight with everything you have. You fight smart, you fight hard, and you fight for something bigger than yourself. That's what we're going to teach you here. A young human cadet named Sarah Mitchell raised her hand. Sir, they say we're the most feared military power in the galaxy now. Is that true? No, Grant smiled slightly. Feared. Yes. But I hope also respected. We didn't earn our reputation through conquest. We earned it through sacrifice and the willingness to stand when others fell. The day we start abusing that power is the day we lose what makes us special. The curriculum at the Academy combined theoretical knowledge with practical training. Students learned history from multiple species perspectives. They studied the great battles of galactic history and analyzed what went wrong and what went right. But the core of the program was something uniquely human: adaptive warfare. Every student, regardless of their species, learned to think like a human soldier. They practiced making decisions under pressure, adapting to changing circumstances, and finding creative solutions to impossible problems. Commander Danny Brooks taught tactical operations. He had been promoted steadily through the ranks, and now held a position training the next generation. His classes were known for being brutally difficult. Your enemy will not follow the rules you expect, Danny told his students. They will not fight fair. They will not give you time to think. So you need to learn to think faster than they can adapt. Let me show you what I mean. I will not fair work, comment to Montenses. With you have defid, with you have daughters of Nastas. The simulation exercises were legendary. Students found themselves in scenarios where every assumption they made was wrong. Enemy forces that should have been weak turned out to be strong. Allies unexpectedly betrayed them. Equipment failed at critical moments. The only way to succeed was to abandon rigid thinking and improvise. A Korvaxi cadet named Tresh struggled at first. His species had thousands of years of military tradition, all based on disciplined formations and predetermined responses. The human way of warfare seemed chaotic to him, almost random. I don't understand, Tresh told Commander Brooks after failing a simulation for the 3rd time. My formation was perfect. My tactics followed established doctrine. Why did I lose? Brooks pulled up a replay of the simulation. You did everything by the book. That was the problem. Your enemy knew the book too. They predicted every move you made because you followed a pattern. Now watch what Cadet Mitchell did. The replay showed Sarah Mitchell's approach to the same scenario. She started with standard tactics, but the moment they stopped working, she threw out the rulebook. She split her forces in unconventional ways, used civilian ships as decoys, and even deliberately fed false information to her own units to confuse enemy intelligence. It's messy, Brooks acknowledged. It breaks half the rules we teach in other classes. But it works, because it's unpredictable. That's the core of human warfare. Do what they don't expect. Tresh practiced for weeks, trying to break free from thousands of years of Korvaxi military conditioning. Slowly, he began to understand. War wasn't a ritual or a test of honor. It was chaos, and the side that adapted to chaos faster usually won. Meanwhile, Admiral Lisa Chen commanded the Coalition Defense Fleet from her flagship, the Independence. The fleet had grown enormously since the war. Over 800 ships now patrolled the space between stars, ready to respond to any threat. But Lisa's job was different now. Instead of fighting wars, she prevented them. The fleet's presence deterred aggression. Their rapid response to piracy and smuggling kept trade routes safe, and their willingness to help any species in distress built goodwill across the galaxy. Captain George Palmer served as Lisa's second-in-command. Together they managed a fleet that included ships from dozens of different species, each with their own customs and procedures. It required diplomacy as much as military skill. "We've got a situation developing in the outer reaches," George reported during their morning briefing. "The Krenth are building up forces near the border again. Nothing overtly hostile, but it's making our allies nervous." Lisa studied the reports. The Krenth had been quiet since the Harvester War, but Warlord Kresh was still in power. He hadn't forgotten his defeats at human hands, and he was patient. "Send a squadron to patrol the border," Lisa decided. Mixed composition. Human and Korvaxi ships working together. The Krenth respect strength, so we'll show them we're watching. But keep it non-threatening. We're not looking to start a fight. Understood. And Admiral, we've received another request from the Brel. They want human advisors to help train their defense forces. Lisa nodded. Approve it. Send them some of our best instructors. The more species that adopt our tactical flexibility, the safer we all are. This was the new reality of galactic politics. Earth didn't dominate through force. Instead, humanity shared its knowledge freely, training other species in the methods that had proven so effective. It created a web of alliances and mutual respect that made the galaxy safer for everyone. Back on Earth, President Karen Lewis was serving her second term. The transformation of humanity's role in the galaxy had been swift and dramatic. Earth was now one of the most influential voices in the Galactic Council, sought out for advice on everything from military strategy to conflict resolution. But Karen was careful to keep Earth humble. She remembered the lessons of human history, how empires that grew too proud inevitably fell. "We need to be careful," she told her advisors during a strategy session. "We have power now. Real power. But power corrupts if you're not vigilant. We need to keep remembering why we fight. To protect, not to dominate." General Richard Hayes, now serving as Earth's Chief of Defense, agreed completely. "We're training a whole generation of officers from different species. In 20 years, the galaxy's military leadership will be full of people who learn to fight the human way. That's more influence than any empire ever had, and we got it by helping people instead of conquering them." The economic impact of Earth's rise was equally dramatic. Human innovation in ship design, weapons technology, and tactical systems became highly sought after. But Earth didn't hoard these innovations. They shared them with allies, traded them fairly with neutrals, and even sold them to former enemies who proved they could be trusted. The Zenthari, who had initially opposed Earth's influence, became some of humanity's strongest trading partners. Overseer Velxis, who had looked down on humans at first contact, now worked closely with Earth's trade representatives. "You surprised us," Velxis admitted during a private meeting with Karen Lewis. "We thought you would be like every other species that gained power quickly. Aggressive, expansionist, dangerous. Instead, you've been generous and careful." "Why?" Karen smiled. "Because we almost destroyed ourselves once by being aggressive and reckless. We learned that lesson the hard way. We don't want to repeat those mistakes on a galactic scale." The Marathi remained humanity's closest allies. Ambassador Linth often visited Earth and marveled at how much had changed in just a few years. "When you rescued us from the Krenth, we thought we had been saved by warriors," Linth said during one visit. "But as we've gotten to know you better, we've realized you're not warriors by choice. You're warriors by necessity. Given the choice, you would rather build then destroy. This assessment was accurate. Earth's greatest contributions to galactic civilization weren't military. Human scientists worked with alien researchers to solve problems that had plagued the galaxy for millennia. Human engineers helped design better ships, more efficient power systems, and revolutionary medical technologies. Dr. Helen Park led a joint research initiative that included scientists from 20 species. They were working on everything from faster-than-light communication to sustainable energy production. The collaboration produced breakthroughs that no single species could have achieved alone. This is what we should have been doing all along, Helen told her team. Humans are good at war because we had to be, but we're even better at solving problems when we work together with others. The Harvester threat hadn't disappeared entirely. They still lurked at the edges of the galaxy, occasionally testing the defenses. But the unified response they had faced at Axis Prime had taught them caution. They no longer attacked with impunity. Admiral Grant, teaching at the academy, made sure every student understood the Harvester threat. They're still out there, he told his classes. They're waiting, learning, adapting. They will come back eventually. Our job is to make sure the next generation is ready when they do. Young officers graduated from the academy and spread throughout the galaxy. They served on coalition ships, on council vessels, even in the militaries of independent species who wanted to learn human tactics. Each one carried with them the lessons that Earth had learned through centuries of warfare. Sarah Mitchell graduated top of her class and received her first assignment as a junior officer on a mixed-species frigate. Standing on the bridge of her ship, looking at the stars, she felt the weight of responsibility that came with wearing Earth's uniform. We're guardians now, her captain told her. A Thanari named Kova, who had trained under human instructors. Not conquerors, not empire builders. Guardians. We stand between the darkness and those who cannot defend themselves. This philosophy spread through the galaxy like ripples in a pond. Species that had never worked together before began cooperating. Old enemies found common ground. The Galactic Council, once paralyzed by tradition and bureaucracy, became more flexible and responsive. The transformation wasn't complete or perfect. There were still conflicts, still disagreements, still species who resisted change. The Krenth remained hostile, though they were careful not to provoke open war. Some species resented Earth's influence and worked to undermine it. But overall, the galaxy was better than it had been. Safer, more unified, more hopeful. 10 years after first contact, Ambassador Paul Jensen stood before the Galactic Council and reflected on how far they had all come. When Earth first arrived in this galaxy, we were nobody, Paul said. We were primitive, weak, ignorant of your ways. Many of you looked down on us, and honestly, you had good reason to. But we proved that being new doesn't mean being weak, that being different doesn't mean being wrong, and that sometimes the newcomer brings perspective that the ancients have lost. The council chamber, once a place where Earth was barely tolerated, now listened to Paul's words with genuine respect. The vote that followed granted Earth permanent status on the Council's Security Committee, cementing humanity's role as one of the galaxy's guardian powers. Back on Mars, Admiral Grant stood before his latest class of cadets. He was older now, his hair completely white, his movements slower. But his mind was sharp, and his commitment unwavering. They're going to ask you why Earth became so powerful, Grant told his students. Why we went from newcomers to guardians in just a few years. We fought when we had to. We adapted when we needed to. We protected those who couldn't protect themselves. And we never, ever, gave up. That's the human way. That's what you need to remember. A cadet asked the question that was on everyone's mind. Sir, do you think we'll always be the most feared military power in the galaxy? Grant considered the question carefully. I hope not. I hope that eventually, all species will learn what we've learned. That they'll all become strong enough to defend themselves and wise enough to help others. Our goal shouldn't be to stay on top. Our goal should be to lift everyone else up until we're all equals. That's when we'll know we've truly succeeded." As the class ended and the students filed out, Grant looked out the window at the Martian landscape. In the distance, he could see the shipyards where new vessels were being built, a joint effort between human and alien engineers. The galaxy had changed, and Earth had changed with it. Humanity had proven itself in war, but more importantly, it had proven itself in peace. They had taken the lessons learned from centuries of conflict and used them not to dominate, but to protect. And in doing so, they had become something more than just another galactic power. They had become the example that others followed, the standard by which strength and honor were measured. The stars still held dangers. There would be more wars, more threats, more challenges. But whatever came next, the galaxy would face it together, united by the bonds that had been forged in the fires of the Harvester War. And Earth, the newest and strangest member of the galactic community, would stand ready, not as conquerors or tyrants, but as guardians, forever watchful, forever ready, forever human. Arning. Ceremonies honored the fallen in every city. The Defiance Memorial became a pilgrimage site for people of all species who wanted to remember those who had sacrificed everything. President Karen Lewis addressed a massive crowd at the United Nations. "We went to the stars, hoping to find our place in the cosmic community. We found instead that our place was to remind the galaxy what courage looks like, what sacrifice means, and what it takes to stand against darkness. We paid a terrible price for that honor." 5 years after the Battle of Axis Prime, the galaxy had settled into a new normal. The harvesters remained contained at the borders. The coalition had grown to include 60 species, and Earth sat at its center, not as a conqueror, but as a protector. The transformation was complete. Humanity had risen from galactic newcomer to the most feared and respected military power in known space. Not through conquest or intimidation, but through sacrifice, innovation, and an unwavering commitment to protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. And that, more than any weapon or fleet, was what made Earth truly powerful. General Richard Hayes visited the Coalition shipyards at Mars, where new vessels were being built around the clock. He spoke with a young ensign named Kelly Wright, who was about to deploy to the front lines. "Are you scared?" Hayes asked. "Terrified," Kelly admitted. "But someone has to stand between the harvesters and the people who can't defend themselves. That's what we do. Right?" Hayes smiled grimly. "That's exactly what we do. That's what makes us human. Good luck out there, Ensign." The war raged on. The harvesters pushed deeper into the galaxy. The Allied Defense Force fought them at every turn, winning some battles and losing others. But they were holding the line. Barely. And then intelligence reports brought news that changed everything. The harvesters were massing their forces. They were preparing for a massive assault, and their target was Axis Prime itself, the political and cultural heart of galactic civilization. The final battle was coming, and it would determine the fate of every species in known space. Lisa smiled. "We trust our people. We give them the training and tools they need, then we let them do their jobs. It's messy sometimes, but it works." Thross filed a report with the Korvaxi High Command. His conclusion was simple. The galaxy was changing, and the Korvaxi needed to change with it, or be left behind. Not all the news was good. The Krenth continued to build up their military. Warlord Kresh was recruiting allies and making promises. He wanted revenge for the humiliation at Pelion's edge, and he was patient enough to wait for the right moment. Intelligence reports reached Earth showing Krenth fleets gathering at the edge of their territory. They were preparing for something big, though nobody knew what. Admiral Grant studied the reports with concern. They're not just rebuilding, they're reorganizing. Kresh is trying to learn from his defeat. That makes him more dangerous than Vexthar ever was. "Should we strike first?" asked General Hayes. "Take out their shipyards before they can complete their buildup?" Grant shook his head. "No. We're not the aggressors here. We defend. We protect. But we don't start wars." That's the line we can't cross, or we become what everyone fears we might be. The tension continued to build throughout the year. Small incidents escalated into larger confrontations. A coalition patrol disappeared near Krenth space. A human merchant ship was destroyed. The Zenthari complained about coalition ships in their territory. The Galactic Council seemed paralyzed, unable to make decisions fast enough to deal with the changing situation. The old species clung to their traditional ways, unwilling to adapt to new realities. And then, something happened that forced everyone to put aside their differences. A signal reached the galactic core from the Deep Space Observatory Network. Something was coming from outside the galaxy. Something massive. Something that didn't respond to any attempts at communication. The harvesters had arrived, and nothing would ever be the same again. The reactions ranged from shock to disbelief to fear. On Axis Prime, the Galactic Council held an emergency session. Ambassador Paul Jensen sat in the observer section and watched as the alien representatives argued about what Earth's victory meant. "This changes everything," said the Korvaxi representative. "If the humans can defeat the Krenth, they're a military power that must be taken seriously." The Zenthari were less pleased. The humans ignored council protocols. They acted without authorization. "This is unacceptable." Paul stood up, even though observers weren't supposed to speak. "With respect, the council talked while people died. We acted while you debated. If that's unacceptable to you, then maybe your system needs to change." The chamber erupted in argument. But underneath the noise, everyone understood the truth. Earth had just proven that the old ways of doing things weren't the only ways. And that scared a lot of people. The Marathi. Admiral Peter Grant was given command of the mission. He was an older man with gray hair and hard eyes. He had fought in enough wars to know how terrible they could be. "They say we can't win," Grant told his officers as they prepared to leave. "The Krenth have more ships, better weapons, more experience. On paper, we should lose badly." "Then why are we going, sir?" asked one young lieutenant. Grant smiled grimly. "Because the aliens don't know how humans fight. They think war is a game with rules. We're about to teach them that it's not." The fleet of 12 human ships left Earth's orbit and jumped into faster-than-light travel. They were heading toward the Mirathi colonies, toward a fight that nobody thought they could win. But they were going anyway. Because that was what humans did. They stood up when others wouldn't. They fought when the odds were impossible. And the galaxy was about to learn what that really meant.